What's up, guys?
Hey, everybody.
Hey,
How you guys been?
it's been pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty good.
Hanukkah Sameach.
Yeah. Was it Hanukkah Shemeach? That's how you say
Yeah,
it?
Hanukkah Sameach.
Hag Sameach. Can you say Hag Sameach Hanukkah, or is that Hanukkah Hag
So
Sameach?
you say like Chag Hanukkah Sameach, or just Chag Sameach, or Hanukkah Sameach. But if you're gonna order like all three of them, you'd do like Chag Hanukkah Sameach.
Huh? The more you know.
That's enough. Nice.
But yeah, for people who don't know, Hanukkah is this week. It started Thursday night, and it goes all the way up to. Does it go the next Thursday night, or is it Wednesday night?
I think it's next Thursday night.
Next Thursday night, it goes all the way there. Okay. So yeah, so it's like it's a week basically, or not a week, 8 days. What am I saying? So it's 8 days that we do Hanukkah. So I thought we'd talk about it because obviously, because it's Hanukkah, and also because you get a lot of questions of like what Hanukkah is about. Is there like a purpose behind it? Do you even need to keep it? Yeah, is it relevant? Like you said. So there's a lot of things like questions that people have. I think the first thing is that they think it's like an alternate to like Christmas. Like somebody was asking me at my job, like, oh, so like Hanukkah is like a Jewish Christmas. I'm like, no.
It just happens fall around the same time.
Yeah, it falls
Right.
around the same time, but they're totally different.
Right. And actually, like Hanukkah is actually older than the celebration of Christmas.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like it's way before.
A long time.
Yeah, like you can go back to like how far back do you go to? Well, I mean, if you look at the Bible, I believe it's in John, the book of John. I don't remember the chapter. Let me look up real quick. I think I have it saved.
Yeah, I want to say that it's about. I want to say it's like at least 300 years before people, maybe 300 or 400 years before people were celebrating Christmas. Because I can't remember what century Christians started celebrating Christmas, but
Christians started celebrating Christmas well after the turn, well after the turn of the century.
right.
Yeah, it was like way after Yeshua
the third
passed.
century. And there was like even different dates whenever they recognized the birth of the Messiah, even and.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
like it took a while for Christmas to even become a holiday, but Hanukkah had been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, because then now you have to think about which interpretation of Christmas do you mean? Because if you mean, because depending on where they went, because I think when it got to like the Nordic regions, like Germany and all that Teutonic region, I think that's when it became the Christmas we know being passed down to us.
Think so? That's the one that we took.
Yeah.
Well, I think that December 25th, that's actually been around for. I think that's one of like the oldest Christian traditions.
I think that's the one that the Pope declared at the time. The Pope of that time, he declared it that.
That also coincided with the birth of Menorahs during that imperial cult worship era, so I'm sure that had something to do with it too. Because it was based out of Rome anyway, so I'm sure that was still a big thing.
That's something we could talk about one of these podcasts because it's pretty good to get into.
Right.
Yeah, we're going down a rabbit trail.
No, I mean, like it's a pretty good thing to like talk about because a lot of people don't even know about the history. I remember one time I was in school, and people were asking me like, "Oh, like about Christmas, like why don't I do Christmas?" And like, it's not, you don't celebrate Jesus' birthday. Like, first off, it doesn't mention it anywhere in the Bible. Yeah. Second off, if you grab an encyclopedia, look up Christmas, it's gonna tell you straight up like where it comes from. That's how my mom found out about Christmas, But anyway, that's another topic.
Yeah.
But Hanukkah, if you read John 10, verse 22, talks about that it's the feast of dedication and that Yeshua goes up to the temple. Now, if people don't know, Hanukkah means dedication. So the feast of dedication that we're reading in the New Testament is Hanukkah. So that's the proof right there that Hanukkah is before Christmas, like way before Christmas. Very relevant, something that all Jews observed. Most definitely Yeshua, because the story behind it, like that we're going to talk about, has a very deep meaning, and it's a symbol of, I want to say, hope and like redemption. It's kind of like I like to say that Hanukkah is like the 4th of July, the Jewish 4th of July, in a way.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the same similarities, a lot of the same At least here in the West, connotations to like the 4th of July or Independence Day or those things.
Yeah,
So
because the reason why we do Hanukkah is more for like memorial wise, rather than religious. Like it does, it's
yeah,
not really like the rest of the feast of God.
yeah, it's a
It's
national holiday.
yeah, it's an observance. It's an observance day, like
Yeah, but
President's Day, Memorial Day, those type of days.
I think
Um,
most people have like the wrong idea about Hanukkah. Like, in addition to it falling around the time of Christmas every year, but most people make the misconception because they're like, oh, it's just Jewish Christmas, and part of that's because the celebration of it has kind of been they've assimilated aspects of like American Christmas celebrations into Hanukkah. You know, people make ugly Hanukkah sweaters and,
Yeah,
a whole bunch of other things. Um, the whole, uh,
the gift giving and stuff like that.
oh yeah,
yeah,
which it makes sense why people do that because it's just the surrounding culture.
Yeah, it's like I want to be part of this environment too. It's like because they feel left out. Like
Yeah,
the modern Jews of this time, they're like, well, people around me, they're having like a really good time doing Christmas parties and stuff like that, giving each other gifts. I want to implement that in my culture too. I want to have gifts. I want to have festivities. I want to have lights and things like that.
especially whenever it comes to kids and stuff like that. They're gonna be like, well,
Yeah.
why does everyone else get presents? Why does everyone else get presents and I don't?
So yeah, the Hanukkah that people see is a very modernized version, kind of like the
Yeah,
way that Coca-Cola made Santa
Mhm.
and kind of modernized Christmas. Hanukkah became modernized and tangled with Christmas, but it has
No,
nothing
it's
similar.
it's interesting that you mention a lot of these things, especially about like the integration of what we know as Hanukkah into the culture that we're living in to fit in and kind of conform. Is Hanukkah's at its root is really a national holiday commemorating defiance and standing against the delusion of our culture and making sure that we don't put anything ahead of the Torah and don't compromise. So it's ironic that a lot of people do things to fit in and conform when the root of the holiday itself is to know
Yeah,
don't mix it, don't conform.
don't
yeah,
conform.
it's
I
the
Yeah,
mean,
exact opposite.
it's just weird.
the story is a very amazing story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because a lot of people they think of Hanukkah, they think of the oil story, like the oil that
yeah,
lasted for 8 days, and that's why the people they light their candles for 8 days because of the oil, the magic, the oil that lasted for so long.
yeah. And to
But
be fair, this is the story that gets told. Like that's kind of like the normative Jewish story to tell around Hanukkah. That's what's in the Gemara, I believe. That's the story of the miracle of the oil. I believe it's the Gemara. Is that?
I'm not 100
And
percent sure where it comes from to be honest. But I know it's like the story that people tell about Hanukkah, and that's the one that all the secular people know about. When they think of Hanukkah, they think of the oil. They
yeah,
think that's why we do it. And if
Yeah.
you think about it, it's kind of random. It's like, why are you guys doing a holiday to commemorate oil lasting for 8 days? Yeah,
and I'd say like it's a
kind of takes away
shame
a
that
lot.
that's what everyone attributes Hanukkah with, even
It's
like the
like,
Jewish world. You know?
yeah, sometimes a lot of people, like the modern secular Jews, they take it like that way. Like, oh, it's just a fun little story, and we keep it just so that we can have this commemoration amongst each other. It's
I
Yeah,
like,
mean, like
they,
even
no.
in religious
they
circles,
kind of
though.
treat it like porn a little bit. It's like it's not really a thing. We just kind of do it because
Even
we
in
are.
some religious circles, like you said, people treat it like that.
I
But
want to say it's most religious circles where like this is the story. This kind of like so like hear me out.
oh no,
So
I see what you mean. I see what you mean
yeah,
because people want to take it to that like spiritual level, but that's not the point of Hanukkah.
right.
It could have happened. We don't know for sure. I mean, there's so many miracles that happen in the Bible. I wouldn't be surprised if this would be one of them to add to the list. You know,
hmm
but I don't think that's the main takeaway because, like Rico said, this thing is about defying this authority that is negative that is coming
Yeah,
towards you and telling what you're doing is wrong and trying to change everything. You know, because we're gonna the story that you find is in the book of Maccabees for people that don't know. I don't know how many chapters is it.
First Maccabees, I want to say is 16 chapters. Second Maccabees is 15 chapters.
Yeah, so it's not a lot. It's not a lot to read, but it has a lot of good historical information and good background. Because what you find out, like paraphrasing the story, to condense it, you have this guy Antiochus, was Epiphanes, right?
Yeah.
hmm
He comes into town, and he wants to conquer Israel. Uh, obviously they don't submit to him, but he comes in and he goes to the holies of holies. No, he doesn't go to the holies of holies. I'm sorry. He goes to the temple and then he sacrifices on the altar a pig.
Yeah.
So he defiles the altar. He defiles the whole temple. People lose their minds. People are going crazy.
They rebel.
And they start killing priests. They start killing priests like nothing. And it gets to the point where this one group of people, the Maccabees, they can't take it anymore. They're like, I can't take this anymore. And it gets to the point where one of them just goes and kills one of the soldiers, and then they have to flee into like the mountains, into the woods, and they're like hiding out, waiting it out, and then eventually they regroup, and this small group of people take on this giant army, and they're able to retake the temple. And the thing that's interesting is that your dad, Rico, that Rico Senior talks about a lot. He always mentions how like it takes 8 days to rededicate the temple.
Yeah.
I know you can find that. What was the verse, Russell, that you mentioned? You said First Kings chapter
First
8.
chapter 8, yeah.
First Kings chapter 8. I know there's Second Chronicles. It mentions it. Second Chronicles. I forgot the verse, but in the Second Chronicles, right before it went, like right as Solomon finishes the temple, and they're having like that 7-day feast, and on the 8th day they dedicate it, and that's why we do the 8 days, because that's how long it takes to rededicate the temple, because the temple was profaned by having somebody else that's nobody do a sacrifice in the first place.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the animal that he sacrifices is the dirtiest animal in the Bible.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, it's also important to know that it's when you say the temple, it's important to know that you need the altar. So the altar itself only takes 8 days. The rest of the temple can take months, years to build. So that's how they had it so soon to do the sacrifice of Solomon. So it's usually it's lumped together. The altar and the temple is one thing, but it's at least in this case, it's good to make sure people know.
Yeah. So like the story in the book of Maccabees is that so the entire temple was defiled. They profaned it, like things were made unclean, and so whenever the army takes back the temple, the priest they cleanse the temple, they purify the temple, but because the altar was defiled, they had to actually dismantle the altar and they had to build a new one and then dedicate this new altar.
Didn't they?
For usage.
Didn't they keep the wood? Or am I wrong on that?
It talks about them tearing down the altar. They kept the stones of the altar
because
they didn't know what to do with them. Yeah, because this conundrum that you run into. It's like, well, these stones were holy and they were dedicated to God, but they were profaned. So we can't. They were holy at one point, so we can't just throw them away. Like even though they've been defiled, it's like they had this sacred status at one point. So it's like it's still a special item and it just can't be used anymore. And so what do you do with it? And so it says that they put them aside in a convenient place until a prophet would arise knowing what to do with them. And it's actually really, it's interesting, like the respect that they had for the temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think like Maccabees is a pretty interesting book because you see a lot of things. I know you were telling me that you were reading, was it Second Maccabees, or were you reading?
Yeah. I was reading. I read Second Maccabees today, and I was reading through First before we started recording.
But you were telling me about how they were mentioning how like the priests, how when they were getting bought out by was it by Antiochus Epiphanes?
So yeah, it was this. That's I think a lot of people they focus on like Antiochus comes in and starts doing this, that, and the other, but I think what a lot of people fail to talk about is that a lot of the problem was caused by assimilation into the Greek culture. Like they were assimilating into the Greek culture, and it was causing this moral corruption in Israelite society. And so in Second Maccabees, we actually hear this story about in the priesthood that I want to say it was like the captain, like a captain of the priests. He got into a dispute with the high priest, and so he basically he got the Greeks. He got an outside power involved with what was going on in the priesthood in Israel, and he tried buying out the position of the high priest, and he did. He got like another king involved, and he appealed to him saying, "I can buy out, like I'll pay you this much money if you put me in the place of the high priest." And then, like not long after, someone does the exact same thing to him, and you just have this spiraling. Things start spiraling out of control, and like the priesthood has become like just a bought out position with people uh, like power grab and attacking one another. But this is also accompanied, like in the countryside, in the cities, people, probably more in the cities, but in these like areas where people are basically assimilating into Greek culture. Like they're like, okay, we're gonna forget our ancestral customs and we're gonna do the Greek thing, like this whole Hellenization. This is like really cool, like gymnasiums and everything that comes along with being Greek. And we're gonna stop circumcising the kids. We're gonna start eating whatever we want, offer offerings to other gods, and it's just like things went out of control. And so
And
the
what's
book of
funny though, but I'm sorry. What's funny though is that they assimilated, but through that assimilation they became submitted under their rule. Like they were not equal; they were
Yeah.
under.
Yeah, the under. And you know, it's really interesting that at least second Maccabees, maybe first, but at least second Maccabees, the author in his interpretation of the events, he sees it, and he, as the characters in the story recognize it happening, that this war is happening because they're people Hellenized, and this is God. Basically, he's punishing the people of Israel by letting the Greeks desecrate the temple, and by letting them uh, kill the Judeans, because God is basically allowing Israel to be punished before the fullness of their sin comes about. He's letting the punishment happen before it gets out of control, so that they'll turn back from their ways.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like this God's justice, and then whenever the people start fighting back, they interpret it as God's mercy, that He's basically allowing things to turn back around now that they've been through this period of punishment.
Yeah.
But it's not unlike what we see in the prophets.
Yeah.
To be honest.
And the thing is that the people, they can do their own thing. Like they can screw up as many times as they want, but the priests, they have their duty to protect God's temple. It's like his sacred space. That's his zone, and anybody that tries to come in and like encroach and stuff like that, that's their duty to protect that from not happening. And by them being bought out and all this corruption happening and letting Antiochus get in and do what he did, they failed their job on that part. But
Yeah.
people like Maccabees, like their family, they took their job. That's their duty. So by them being defiant and fighting back, they were keeping their part of the bargain. Sort of say. But I think once you learn about the story and things like that, it has a very deeper meaning than just miracle oil that lasts 8 days. It's a lot about not letting yourself become assimilated into the culture. That your identity is very important. Because once you try to assimilate, you lose yourself, and then you lose you lose basically the identity that God wants you to have, and the things that He wants from you, and things like that.
Yeah.
The entire story of the Maccabees and Antiochus Epiphanes is essentially just never compromise.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Never compromise.
It always starts with one.
It is the Jewish 4th of July.
Yeah.
And it's like, to put things in perspective, like they were being killed for trying to keep the covenant. It describes people, they weren't able to keep the Sabbath. They weren't able to keep the holidays in the Bible. Like they weren't allowed to. Like they would be killed if they did. They weren't able
to do
circumcise
sacrifices
their
and stuff like
children.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the temple was desecrated, so they couldn't really offer sacrifices in a pure way. So they weren't able to do all of this stuff. Like they weren't able to actually keep the commandments properly. And God was punished. They interpreted as God punishing the nation for the actions of these people in Israel that have fallen into idolatry. And so you have that voice inside of the people of Israel. You have that voice in the people of God that says, but we want the commandments. We want to keep the covenant, and we're willing to fight for it. We're willing to push back against this encroaching idolatry.
Yeah.
And whenever they finally pushed it out of the temple, the beating heart of Israel, they declared an 8-day celebration from that point forward to commemorate that event. I think that's just such an amazing thing.
Yeah, it really follows a pattern that happens a few times in the Bible, and that is usually in Israel's darkest hour. There's always a remnant of the zealous few that will like stand up and fight and then turn the heart of the nation back. Happened at the golden calf incident. Happened with Pinchas. Happened. It's happened a bunch of times. It's happened with judges. The judges was a great example of that. In a dark time of chaos, always individuals would rise up and say, "No, we're not going to compromise."
Yeah.
That's what they had to do. So
it's a story that does line up with all the rest of the Bible. Because a lot of people have a problem that it's not something that's in the Bible. They're like, oh, well, it's an extra biblical book. But the thing is that you look at it as a historical book if you want to. Because it gives you a lot of detail about how they were trying to handle, how you say it, Hellenize Israel and try to make them submit and all this chaos that happened. And clearly you see, like I said in the New Testament, that Yeshua went during the Feast of Dedication. So the story of the book of Maccabees and what they did is something common in that time, something that everybody knew. So it's not something that you can just throw away. It does have importance. Because I know there's some people that think we shouldn't even keep Hanukkah, that we shouldn't follow it. Yeah, it's really weird.
It's very odd.
It's very strange when people have such a weird stigma about extra books outside the Bible that haven't been canonized. I mean, the Bible we all read, most of us read today, the general population was canonized by the Catholic Church. Why would you trust anything that they've done?
Yeah, because maybe they would have put it, but they just didn't. They're like, there's not enough room. I'm sorry.
I don't know. But the point is, it's always good to go out and explore these books that aren't necessarily in the text, but are out there and are equivalent to the time.
I mean, if you find something in the text that doesn't add up with the Bible, then there's your answer to is it valid? But in this case of the Maccabees, like a lot of it is just like it's like a historical account. It's kind of like when you start reading First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles. Those books are defined as historical. So you can see the Maccabees in the same way follow a similar type of writing, if you want to say. But I think it is, like you say, ironic that people try to Christmasize Hanukkah, and make it like the Jewish Christmas. If it would have happened on June 30th, we would have had fireworks on Hanukkah.
Pretty much.
Fireworks and deep fried hot dogs.
That's right. Dreidel-shaped fireworks and dreidel-shaped hot dogs.
Yeah, but I think Hanukkah, there's nothing wrong with keeping Hanukkah. It's just a memorial thing, And I don't think you're adding to God's word by following it.
You're not taking away anything.
You're not taking away anything.
Yeah, the biblical holidays, like the holidays that we have in the Torah, because I mean, if you want to say biblical holidays, that's going to include Purim.
Yeah, that too, because you see Purim's in the Bible, but it's not really a feast.
Yeah,
but it's there.
Yeah, holy day.
Like they let us know that they didn't have a problem keeping holidays outside of what we have in the Torah. It's like the Torah is the minimum. Like those are your actual requirements for what the nation is supposed to do in the temple, but it's not the limit for any celebration throughout the year. Like it's the requirements, but it's not like this limit that you have on actually celebrating things. You're not supposed to equate. No one equates Purim with like, say, Passover or Sukkot. Like they don't consider it as important or as holy, and no one treats Hanukkah like it's as holy as the other days either. No one stops working on Hanukkah, and they didn't like alter the temple service in order to accommodate Hanukkah. Like they didn't start offering sin sacrifices. I think that the celebration of Hanukkah, they would offer like Thanksgiving sacrifices, but I mean that's not actually altering the temple service. It's like you could bring Thanksgiving sacrifices like any time.
Yeah, it's like a free will offering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Spontaneous happiness. Mm-hmm. And it's not like you're offering sin sacrifices and guilt sacrifices that are communal. I mean, if you were to do that, that would be altering the temple service to a certain extent, because you had times whenever you were the nation was told to bring those.
Exactly.
Right, but burnt offering, free will offerings, peace offerings. It's like Thanksgiving. There's not necessarily a limit to that type of thing. So it's like even whenever they did things in the temple on Hanukkah, like they were actually respectful of the way the temple service functioned, and they respected the boundaries and they worked within what they could do. They didn't alter things. So,
I really feel like the question anyone should ask that's doubting if you should follow Hanukkah: did Yeshua do Hanukkah? You're doing Hanukkah. There we go. What's the argument? If the Messiah did it, what's the argument?
He went to the temple during the Feast of Dedication. Like, what do you want me to tell you?
Every year, probably.
Yeah, it's like people, like, to be fair, it's like John does say, it's like, and he was in the temple, the Feast of Dedication. It doesn't say, oh, he was celebrating it. It's like, yeah, well, he was also there at Passover. Like, it didn't say like he was there at Passover celebrating Passover. It's like, no, he uses the same phraseology as it does in other places in John's. Because John, and it's.
Honestly, I don't think he thought like in the future there's gonna be people doubting whether he keeps his feast. Yeah, I think he just assumed like, well, I mean, do I really have to say he celebrated? Because why would they doubt it? Whatever. I'm just gonna write this down.
Yeah, we got to think about the context. These are letters of response to an issue.
Yeah, because the holiday is like a very pro-temple thing.
Exactly. And so we don't know why he's writing this letter to these people and phrasing it this way. We don't know what sparked this off. We only know what he said. And he is writing with the assumption that they already know exactly what he's talking about. So that's why the language gets a little...
Little did he know in the 2020 today.
Like 2,000 plus years.
2,000 plus years. People would be like, I don't know about that, man. What do you mean
by internet podcasts will be questions.
But yeah, I think that that's just like the basics that we wanted to cover, because that's like the questions that I usually get like at my job. Like people ask me like, oh, so like I said, like is this the Jewish Christmas? So do you guys it's about the gifts, it's about the oil, and usually like I tell them like no, it's a memorial thing about the Jews taking back the temple and stuff like that. I say Jews to the secular people, but obviously, the Maccabees and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But to generalize it that way, it's easy to consume. I guess it's the nice way to say it.
Like a 2-hour history and geography lesson before you.
Just like grab this chart.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Well,
actually, I have both books of Maccabees right here.
You go have a read. I'll answer your question.
I have copies, pocket versions.
So what do you guys think about... So I hear this objection to Hanukkah. People say, well, it's bad that they use an 8-candled menorah ripoff, the Hanukkah. Like, you have the seven branch candelabrum, what we call the menorah that was used in the temple. And the Hanukkah is like, it's like this Hanukkah menorah. It basically is a Hanukkah menorah. It's like that's the way that it's constructed a lot of times, but to commemorate what happened in the temple. But people, they say, well, you're making an 8-branch menorah, and so you're corrupting the menorah for your own purposes. And I see people saying, well, that's like a faulty rabbinic menorah. This Hanukkah, it's not the same thing, and it's not holy.
But the thing is, like, is it supposed to be an exact replica of a menorah? I don't think so.
They do know the menorah doesn't exist anymore, right? The temple is.
Well, like what gets me about it is, is Rico frozen on your screen?
That
can you say that again? You kind of cut out for me, bro.
Cut off, man. The government, you do too much.
Spit too much truth. No, I was just asking, like, they do know that the menorah doesn't exist anymore. The temple isn't standing.
I mean, even if it did, it's like. It's not profaning the menorah because it's not the menorah. I think that's why they made it that way, because they don't want to have something that's like a replica of something that's in the temple.
I think that's
Yeah,
a really good point that you bring up. Like, did you? So I've actually noticed that in Orthodox circles, like people don't just go around making replicas of the menorah just to use for their own purposes
yeah,
because
it's usually just like for a showcase. Like,
Right.
right. So they
this is
don't
how
make
it
like
used to look like.
yeah, exactly. Like they don't just go around and make 7 branch menorahs
Yeah,
just to
no,
light in their home for
Yeah.
decoration.
there's no like high priest action figures with like temple figures and stuff like that, because that
Yeah,
would be super offensive. So why are you gonna
yeah,
have something in your house that's a replica of something in the temple and then use it?
yeah.
That would be that would
It's
be
like
bad.
encroaching. Yeah, and like I've actually seen like in Orthodox synagogues where people will they'll have like a 6 branch menorah, and they deliberately do it that way because they don't want to encroach on the 7 branch menorah.
Exactly. It's
So
like
yeah, they have like an 8 or 9 branched one
It's super weird. Like
for Hanukkah.
they're treating they're treating the 7 branch menorah like it's the Virgin Mary. It's not actually there. I don't know why are you so careful about this? When it gets reforged, remade, then yes, then this will be a valid
if you
question.
think about it, if it's an 8-day festival and you want to count down on it, how much easier is it to have it on an 8?
Else,
You can do it on a 7 candle menorah. You could do it. Just
right?
share 2 candles on in the middle.
Yeah, like, that was the reasoning.
It's like, look, logically wise, like, why wouldn't you make it 8 if it's 8 days and I want to count it down?
I don't
2,
know.
why am I gonna make a replica of something in the temple and then use it? That's a big no. That's like
Yeah,
trying to make like a replica of the ephod and walking around wearing it. You'd be
yeah.
stoned.
Yeah, hang around with it. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it looked good on you, so I made it myself. Like, it's not gonna happen.
It's like do you and I see like a lot of people. I think I'm gonna take a step back here in like the non-Jewish world. I think a lot of people don't see what the problem is making something like a 7 branch menorah and just kind of like lighting it for their own purposes and um or I don't know. I think or at least they don't understand where like the Jewish point on this. Like they don't understand where the Jewish people are coming from. Uh Whenever like say like Orthodox Jews, they won't make a replica of the menorah. I feel like a lot of people just don't understand that way of thinking because they don't understand the whole idea of encroachment, the temple service, and not.
And on top of that, they feel like they can mold it into any way they want. If they want to make it into like a 1 candle stand menorah, like in the Roman Catholic Church, they'll do it that way. They'll interpret it that way. People, that's the problem. Like the Jewish people, the one good thing that they have is that they don't change a lot of things. They want to keep it this way. It's like, look, there's this thing. God said it's going to be like that. Let's keep it like that. He said to
Yeah.
do it on the 7th day. The last day is Shabbat. Let's do it on the Sabbath. And then you
Yeah.
have people in a bunch of sects that are like, he said that, but did he mean that? I don't know. Are you sure he said that? I don't know. It's
Were you
like
there?
it says it. It's written down for us. It's like I don't know about that. Does it?
I don't believe this guy.
What does it mean in the Greek?
Yeah, what do you mean the Greek? Right? Yeah.
So thinking about the like the people getting upset about it being 8 or 9 branches as opposed to 7. Think about it like it's like, oh, it needs to be 7, like the actual menorah is 7. It's like, okay, so if I want like a replica, it's like, okay, you just have like menorah replicas around your house. Do you
But
also have like replica altars of incense that you burn your incense on to make the house smell nice? Do you have like your replica table of showbread that you eat lunch at?
again,
Just a little tiny loaves of showbread.
again, the problem is that they're assuming that it's supposed to be a replica of the menorah, which it's not. Like again, how are you gonna count 8 days on a 7 lamp menorah? And why are you gonna make a replica of something that's in the temple? Like,
I really
it's a
feel
big
like
no.
the entire argument is kind of moot.
It's going in circles. It's like,
And if you're really going to go there about what is essentially a very fancy candlestick, there's a lot more issues than Hanukkah right now.
hey, but if they find that fancy candlestick, I'm gonna be excited. Like,
Again,
that's one
if they
puzzle
find
piece.
it or they remake it, then okay, now we actually have to ask the question: is this now encroaching on this? Because now it actually exists again.
Yeah.
I don't think it would because it's not exactly that. You know what I mean? That's why it's 8. In my opinion, I could be wrong. I could be.
In that one scenario, you could be forgiven for saying, I choose not to do it because the real thing is like over there and I could physically go see it.
Yeah, and if you think about it, back then they didn't really have like calendars or anything like that. So it's like, hey, let's count it down on this 8 candle for 8 days. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, and like
let's make these
like,
dreidels.
The
Yeah,
Torah gets saying like you're not supposed to encroach on certain things. Like you shouldn't make the anointing oil for your own purposes, or you shouldn't make the incense for your own purposes, like according to the way that they did it. Like it doesn't say that you can't. Like it doesn't say that you can't make like a 7-branched candlestick for your own purposes and
it
light
doesn't,
it.
but it probably because it assumed that people would figure that out.
Maybe, yeah.
Because I mean, it tells you like you can't mix a wool and linen, and a lot of people are like, oh, like you can't have a shirt mixed with wool and linen. And it's like no, like that was something that the priests would wear, so they don't want you to wear what the priests are wearing because that's encroachment, you know.
Like I understand. All I'm saying is like it doesn't bother me necessarily whenever people. Like if someone has like a replica of the menorah in their house or something, I don't. To me, like it honestly doesn't bother me.
Oh, if they have a replica, it's like having I don't know, like a small model of the temple. It's like you're not really encroaching. It's a model, like
right. But it's like, but understanding like why the Jewish people choose not to make it like a 7-branch menorah, like it's like, you know, just like understand why they do what they do. They're deliberately making it look a little different because they're trying not to encroach, and they're sincere about what they're trying to do. And it's like they're coming from this position of like really respecting the temple service. And I feel like all these people just like, oh well, it's changed. They're these like a lot of people in the Hebrew roots movement, they look at it like, oh, they've changed something. And it's like, no, they're actually just trying to they're trying not to encroach on it. That's all.
they don't want to offend God. Like look, I want to make this cool holiday, but I don't want to step on anybody's toes. Let's make this 8-branch menorah.
Yeah, and it's like menorah-esque, you know, like it. Some of them are fashioned to be menorah-esque, to kind of like resemble it.
I think the problem is that a lot of people assume that is the menorah in the temple.
Yeah,
yeah.
There's a lot of Facebook philosophers that think that's the actual and so they just start raging when they see someone else do it.
And then they battle with the other people that are like upset about the number of like branches on the menorah. And
it's just endless flame wars all
day. But yeah, that's why, you know, Hanukkah, it's a serious day to keep, but it's not like a replacement holiday for us. Like, oh, we can't do Christmas, we can do Hanukkah. It's not meant to be that. It's supposed to instill you with that idea, like Rico said, that you got to be that small percentage among the minority that says no, like this is wrong, and I'm gonna stand up for my values. Don't compromise. That's the story behind Hanukkah, and you shouldn't compromise for Hanukkah. You know.
Yeah. Or anything. Don't compromise.
Or anything, yeah.
Anyway,
and
yeah.
What were we gonna say?
Oh, it's just. I was just agreeing. It's just that it's that holiday that's supposed to remind us don't compromise.
Yeah, don't compromise.
I go to Walmart and compromise it. Yeah, that's great.
Don't put those elf ears in Hanukkah shirt.
Don't. Are those Hanukkah stockings? It's not even.
It's not a thing. Is that Jewish Santa?
Santa hat. Oh. A blue and white Santa hat. It's my Hanukkah hat. Wait, what? What?
I know.
It's just it's just a regular Santa hat, but just instead of a beard, beyoncé. That's all it is. Just the beyoncé. Still hold on.
But yeah, I think on that note, that's what we'll close it on. Don't compromise. That's the moral of the Hanukkah story.
Never back down. Never surrender.
Never say never.
Never say
All right, so
shalom, guys.
Shalom, guys.
Shalom,
Shabbat shalom.